evening. Welcome to a special edition of APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Tonight we look back at a 3-decade-old fight. A company called OI Leasing has been fighting for a treaty exemption on taxation, but they lost and the taxman won, at least for now. OI has exhausted their ability to force the issue in courts, leaving some workers on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars. Delaney Windigo asks, is there any way out?
It's been years of stress for Ramona Dunn, all because she owes the CRA lots of cash, $97,000, and now the Revenue Canada agency is threatening her. They want her to pay up or they'll put a lien on her home.
I've had many sleepless nights, like wondering, how do they expect me to pay? I'm thinking, how am I going, to pay this? I can't. It's, like I said, it's stressful, and it plays a toll on me as well.
Dunn is not alone. There are over 4,000 others who joined a legal battle on the treaty right to tax exemption. And like Dunn, many of them now risk going broke. Here's how it all started. Dunn worked here at Anishinaabe Health in Toronto as a triage nurse and diabetes educator for 5 years. She was employed through an agency located on the Six Nations Reserve. According to Native Leasing Services, that means employees should be tax exempt. Roger Obonsawin, the owner, now retired, said it was a First Nations right. He fought the government in court for years.
I truly believe then, as well now, that I do have a right through the treaty that since I was a status Indian and I was working for an Aboriginal agency based on a reserve, according to the treaty rights, I did not have to pay income taxes on those earnings.
There are only 2 ways these workers might get off the hook. First, if the Supreme Court overturns a previous decision, but there's no guarantee the Supreme Court will even hear the case, or if the Canada Revenue Agency forgives the money owed. In 2013, Native Leasing Services asked the CRA to do just that. They filed an application for remission.
It's supposed to go through the Canada Revenue Agency offices and up to Cabinet, and it hasn't moved from the Canada Revenue Agency offices. We've made numerous requests to ask that it be processed and forwarded, and we've had no response. So it's stuck.
A recent investigation by the CBC found the CRA cut a secret deal with wealthy clients from KPMG, a consulting firm. The clients were avoiding taxes in an offshore tax scheme. It's a double standard, according to Fish.
My personal view is it's appalling. It sends a message that there are different rules for wealthier people than there are for regular working people.
The Canada Revenue Agency said it won't discuss specific cases for privacy reasons, but in a statement said, each remission request is carefully reviewed by the CRA to determine if the collection of a tax or enforcement of a penalty is unreasonable or unjust, or if remission is in the public interest. And on the issue of making deals, it said, the CRA does not give preferential treatment to certain taxpayers who are non-compliant over others. Relevant laws and compliance actions are applied evenly and without favor. Dunn sent a petition to the Revenue Minister, but received a lackluster response. The minister said the actions taken by CRA were in line with tax collection policies.
The way that I feel is because myself and approximately 4,000 other Native leasing employees exerted our treaty rights, CRA wants to make an example of us.
After years of litigation in lower courts, Native Leasing Services lawyer has asked for leave to the Supreme Court, but so far hasn't received a response. Delaney Windigo, APTN National News, Toronto.
OI never heard back because in 2002, the Supreme Court of Canada refused to hear the case. The Canada Revenue Agency started collecting back taxes. Here's an update 1 year later from a few of the workers affected.
Ramona Dunn enjoys her time spent at home with their 2 pets. A home is something she's always wanted.
I've always wanted a home like this. The old, the century home, the old-fashioned charm. It's got a lot of character. I wanted to have a home so that when my boys and my grandson come to visit, they've got Grandma's place.
But Dunn is at risk of losing her dream home to the Canada Revenue Agency.
They have put a lien on my home, so that has really put me into a bind.
Dunn is on the hook for thousands of dollars in back taxes.
Right now, the last assessment I got says that I owe $76,008.64. This was back in March 6, 2017.
She was employed through an agency called OI Leasing, based out of 6 nations. It leased its status employees to businesses off reserve. According to OI Leasing, it meant that their employees would be tax exempt. Not so.
So now, with the way things stand is, okay, I have the disability tax credit that I can put towards my income tax payment every year, but it's probably just going to be enough money to pay for the interest and penalties that CRA puts against me every year. So I'm hoping, I'll find out next year, that it's going to be staying stable around the $76,000 and not increase the way it has.
To get by, Dunn has 2 part-time jobs.
I work part-time as a nurse, and I also work as a school bus driver. And between the 2, I am just barely able to meet my expenses every month. I do find that as every year goes on, I am getting deeper and deeper into debt.
Dunn is not the only OI Leasing employee the CRA is after. There's about 4,000 others. Rachel Schilling has the same financial worries.
Well, I'm about to retire. I am leaving my job, and I make less than $40,000 a year. The government says I owe $650,000, and there's no way possible that I could ever pay that back.
Schilling moved to Toronto from Chaging First Nation. She says she had no choice.
When I left there were 6 people working full-time. The Indian agent, the police, the teacher, the public health nurse, and the Indian band administrator. And I knew that only one of those people were Native, and I knew that I would not stand a chance of working on my reserves. I had to move. I moved to Toronto.
So in 1993, Schilling started working at Anishinaabe Health in Toronto. That's when she became an OI Leasing employee.
They talk a lot about Section 87 of the Indian Act, and the Indian Act says that anyone who lives and works on reserve is tax exempt.
But it wasn't long before trouble over taxes began.
I worked for a Native organization. It was non-profit. I worked with Native people, for Native people, and they felt that was a good case that would go forward because there's so many people who were in my situation.
Schilling's case won in the federal court, but the federal government appealed and she lost. Since then, she says she's lived with the stress for over 20 years with little support from Indigenous leadership.
In 1993, when we were protesting this, we had no support from AFN. Ovid Mercury was the Grand Chief, and there was no support from AFN.
Schilling says it's affected her whole life.
It meant that I could not look for careers outside the Native community. It meant that I had to, I did stay in Toronto. I worked with non-profit organizations working with and for Native people. Other people that I know who did move about, they had their bank accounts seized and their pay garnished. So it was a hardship for them.
15 hours north of Schilling in a coffee shop in Thunder Bay sits another OI employee. Tom Hawk worked for OI Leasing for about a year and a half in 2005. In 2007, he was notified by the CRA, and they took an aggressive approach 2 months ago.
I was really happy that they going off work on a Friday afternoon. I figured I'd leave early. I went to fill up gas on a reserve where I worked, and I found out that there was something wrong with my bank account. So I figured, well, this. I check in the morning, Saturday, and see what is happening. And then I find out here at the bank in Thunder Bay that CRA had frozen my bank account.
Hawk, who is about to retire with a debt of over $14,000, says it's a lot of stress to deal with.
I'd relied on the old age security, CPP, and the guaranteed income supplement, to bring me up to a certain level, and that would keep me going. But if Canada Revenue is waiting there like a hawk, ready to grab what little money that would be coming, I don't know. It'd probably kill me.
After years of litigation in the courts, OI Leasing applied for a remission order with Revenue Canada. That was 5 years ago. We'll have that in part 2 tomorrow. Anna Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Stay with us as we continue this special edition. Coming up next, more on the aggressive tactics of the Canada Revenue Agency to claim unpaid taxes. Welcome back. Thousands of First Nations people are the target of some aggressive tactics over unpaid income taxes. The Canada Revenue Agency has refused APTN's multiple requests to explain why on camera. Here again is Annette Francis with how it all began and an update on what's happening.
This Edmonton-based lawyer has been working on the OI Leasing file in one way or another for the past 20 years. James Fish says he's been doing it pro bono off and on because of the 4,000 victims of the Canada Revenue Agency, like Rachel Schilling, Tom Hawk, and Ramona Dunn.
I admire these people who asserted a native right that existed without any disagreement up to the 1992 policy changes that the Canada Revenue Agency took it away from them. They're fighting for something they believe is important, and they're suffering because of it.
Fighting Revenue Canada takes a lot of work and time. 5 years ago, Fish applied for a remission order to grant relief from the taxes and penalties on behalf of the employees.
Since that time, we've had nothing but stalling from the government. They have made several explanations as to why they haven't processed the remission order. We answer their concerns, and then they raise another one. So essentially, it's stalled. Nothing is happening.
Fish says he doesn't understand why the OI Leasing employees are being targeted.
There are guidelines that have been established by the Canada Revenue Agency that seem to exempt treaty band councils and band organizations. So you have this unusual situation where an employee of OI is working side by side with an employee from one of the bands in Thunder Bay. The employee doing the same work, and the employee from the band in Thunder Bay is tax exempt, and the OI employee is required to pay taxes. We don't understand how that can be.
According to Luba Irwin of OI Leasing, it's because of a deal that was used as a tactic to divide their support.
When we started fighting this issue in 1995, when CRA imposed the tax on, or said everybody else was taxable, they made a deal with AFN and National Native Women and the Native political organizations across the country. At that point, we were all supporting, just before all this happens, we were all supporting or fighting the tax changes. And when the deal went through, then we lost the support of those that got the exemption.
Chief Isidore Day agrees there hasn't been much fairness when it comes to how the OI Leasing employees have been targeted compared to the Assembly of First Nations, whose head office is located here on reserve in Akwesasne and has tax exemption in place for its employees.
It's all based on agreements, and I can't get into that right now, but I can tell you that it is an unfair situation, and it's one that the CRA does need to respond to.
But the Indigenous leadership that stayed quiet for so long appears to be stepping up. Last year at the Special Chiefs Assembly, the Chiefs voted in support of Resolution Number 72, which calls for the Canada Revenue Agency to end the harassment of former OI employees.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Chiefs in Assembly call upon Canada and the Minister of National Revenue, in the spirit of reconciliation, to provide immediate direction to the relevant Canada Revenue Agency employees to end all collection procedures against current and former OI Native Leasing Incorporated employees.
Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day says there hasn't been a lot of movement yet.
We're doing work to help out where we can. There's a real complexity to this issue, and it's a complex way in how you address this is really been the challenge for our people as individuals. How do they navigate through such an experience? And it's been horrifying for those individuals, and I think we as First Nation leaders, I think we probably had to have done more, I believe, to avoid some of this, and that's what we're doing now.
Another example of a double standard that made headlines last month is the number of rich Canadians who are able to avoid paying taxes by using offshore accounts. Fish says his clients are low income and not able to buy their way out.
The millionaires have the ability to get expensive and sophisticated advice. They have a lot of influence with the government because of their position. The people that are involved in this tax dispute, typical average income is somewhere between $16,000 and $28,000 a year. They don't have that kind of political influence, so they're an easy target.
Chief Day says it's a reconciliation issue that needs to be addressed.
What we want our people to do is connect with their chiefs, make sure that they're in a position to be called upon to provide information. What we want to try to do is we want to try to help our people navigate through this, and we'll know more after our meeting with CRA. We have the minister who will be coming to the meeting to meet with us. We've gotten that far now, which is much more than what has been done in the past.
The Minister of National Revenue met with Ontario Chiefs today, where many issues were discussed, including tax relief instead of remission and the portability of rights. APTN requested comment from Minister Laboutte and the Canada Revenue Agency, but both requests were denied. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Almost 4,000 First Nations workers were part of the court challenge. They insisted their salaries should be tax-free. The courts disagreed. In 2016, the Assembly of First Nations made a commitment to do something about it with Resolution Number 72. But as you've seen in our recap, according to Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day, nothing has been done. He calls the situation sickening and promised to do something. APTN asked him why National Chief Perry Bellegarde hasn't acted on Resolution 72.
I think the National Chief has to answer that. I basically am going to step forward on my own steam and ensure that what I do as the Ontario Regional Chief is speak where I can on behalf of those individuals that have come forward and said, listen, I need your help. As far as the National Chief and what he does or doesn't do, it's a mystery at times.
After the break, Ottawa correspondent Annette Francis reports on the situation of the treaty right to tax exemption in Canada. Welcome back. Joining us now in our Ottawa studio to talk about the OI leasing issues and treaty tax exemption is APTN's Annette Francis. Annette, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
You mentioned in your story that there are over 4,000 other OI employees affected. Have you spoken with many of the others?
Yes, there are many other, Ramona Duns, Rachel Shillings, and Tom Hawks, and I did speak with a couple of others. They were not willing to go on camera. They feared retribution from Revenue Canada. These people, this issue has destroyed people's lives. People have talked about, family breakdown due to the stress related to the financial issues. Also, people have lost their homes. People have been diagnosed with severe depression. Some are unable to make ends meet day to day. So, yeah, there's a lot of others that are going through this.
Devastating stuff. The Minister of National Revenue met with chiefs at the AFN Assembly in December. What have you heard about those meetings?
I talked to a chief who is from Ontario. He told me there was a closed meeting with Minister Laboutte. He said the chiefs talked about the property issues. They also wanted to have those finances reimbursed to the victims. He said it was a heated, the chiefs were heated, that the minister, there was supposed to be a Q&A, but the minister left before any of that happened.
Annette, we're running short on time here, but what are you expecting to hear in the coming months?
Well, this issue isn't going away. There's still, nothing has been done to help these victims. The chiefs have dedicated this issue. They've said they're going to continue pushing. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be something that's going to continue on over the coming months.
Annette, as you mentioned, a lot of lives being affected by this. Thank you for your continued reporting on this and for joining us to talk about it here today.
Thank you.
And that is your APTN National News for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us for this special edition on OI Leasing. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a good night. We'll see you back here next time.